his UK accent. So
then I had to mess it all up.
Noel has his Irish accent. He grew up on a dairy farm in Ireland, but has spent most of his career here in the United States, mostly working on compost. And he has developed some of the very exciting and successful compost facilities here. I recruited them to give this presentation. It's not something that they really wanted to necessarily to give, except that they understand that this is one of the really interesting aspects of compost that is quietly a part of the reason why so many customers like compost. It's one that I was introduced to when I first came to Philadelphia 30 years ago, and Noel's going to extend that science to us today. Thank you, Noel.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much for the opportunity. Yeah, I want to talk about, I guess, the subject of disease suppression is one that's been around for a very, very long time, but it's only very recently, and maybe now, we're beginning to actually, extract some of the value. I think we all talk about the value of biosolids and biosolids products, but this conversation or presentation is more about our efforts and some success of late of actually extracting that value out of the product, as in converting it to dollars and cents. And in doing so, I'm going to share kind of two commercial level examples along the way. I guess the other thing that's very exciting about this field of disease suppression from a composter's point of view is it's moving the conversation away from, in composting, we've, I think, too many conversations about sort of maybe the kind of loosey-goosey, feel-good aspects of using compost. They're quite frankly having conversations and competing in a field with the likes of Bayer Crop Sciences, DuPont, and BASF and all those folks. It's a very different world that we're beginning to play in. So as a lead into that, I want to talk a bit about the value of how we value, maybe a quick look at how we value compost today in terms of the marketplace there. And this is, I think, fairly generic for a lot of people who are involved in compost or in the sales and marketing of compost. Obviously, the starting point is agriculture. We certainly see agriculture as sort of the market probably of last resort when it comes to compost and compost value. It's, yes, high volume, low market, but really if we're to truly move beyond Class A and well beyond Class A, I think we have to have products that are acceptable, I think, usable, and quite frankly have value away beyond the agriculture market. I mean, maybe the exception to this is there are some high value specialty crops out there where I think compost has some promising opportunities. Okay, topsoil mix is the other kind of traditional one. Historically, that was a kind of the easy next level low hanging fruit. Usually compost is bought in that market for a volumetric replacement for topsoil or as an additive to make basically junky topsoil into a saleable product. You're never getting value for some of the more maybe specific attributes such as organic matter and even nutrients. Strictly a bulk is what you're selling. Then landscaping is, I think, maybe the broad strokes, where most of the value is today. And here you're starting to, this market, you're starting to look at composts are being separated from a point of view of their level of quality, consistency in that, and how they perform. And at its broadest level in landscaping, it's, I think, the relationship between organic matter and soil health. That more than anything else is really, and the results of compost because of that is really what is driving the value of compost today in landscaping in general. Environmental, relatively new, I guess, less than 10 years maybe. Here, there are a lot of reasons to sell compost into the environmental market, and some of what Charles spoke about earlier, I would say some of that can be certainly called broadly in the environmental market. But more than anything else, the whole issue of managing stormwater is what's driving compost sales in the environmental market. We look at that in two ways: treatment and prevention. Prevention is the big market. In essence, what you're doing here is you're adding organic matter to the soil based on the well-accepted principle that higher organic matter holds on to more water. Therefore, you have less storm water to treat and it's cleaner. The treatment is really what we're talking about, maybe bioretention basins. Compost is an ingredient there, and the use of compost products in filter stocks, which by volume is a very small market. And I would say that little market is probably the only market that I'm aware of where biosolids compost may not be the number one choice. Virtually everywhere else, I think it's the highest performing one. Yeah. And then, of course, what I really want to talk about today, disease. And it is, again, been around forever, but it's only now, and my examples I'm going to get into are really cases where we're selling the compost because specifically of its disease suppression properties. So, you name the disease, there's a research paper out there, or multiple, that shows compost can really do a good job with the disease. What we have failed to do so far is turn that into actually a sales price in terms of the compost. So. And it would be wrong of me to do a presentation like this without recognizing Dr. Harry Hoitink. To many of us in the composting industry, he is the modern day father of this whole effort. He's done some fantastic research over the last 30 years. I remember being approached by somebody many years ago, and I must, with hindsight, as I thought back on this presentation, I must embarrassed that I rejected the idea. I was approached. He isolated something called trichoderma, and was able to show that different strains of it could treat different diseases. And I think a group of people planned to turn this into a business, to commercialize it and market it. And I was approached to be an investor in that. And at the time, I was very dismissive of the whole idea. Money was tight as well, but I remember with hindsight, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't actually contribute to it. So again, he's the guy who's seen, for my generation in composting, as the guy who proved unequivocally that compost can contribute in a very meaningful way to disease suppression. Okay, so briefly, how does it work? There are basically 4 accepted principles for how compost helps with plant diseases. Number 1, they're antagonistic towards pathogens by creating antibiotics that will fight off the disease. Number 2, it's competition. Competition mainly for nutrients, but also for energy, which of course comes from the organic matter. And as a rule, the beneficial microbes in compost tend to be to outcompete pathogens. Number 3, they feed on pathogens. And number 4, which is a very, very interesting subject, I think, a whole area, induced systemic resistance. And here is where the compost stimulate disease, repressive genes in the root zone. And what's really, really intriguing about this is the compost, it can travel from root to root without compost coming in contact with every root. And it was actually Dr. Hoitink and his team actually were the ones who actually proved this. So, how long is the cure? The answer is it depends, but pretty long term. In principle, if you think of it like this, it's about if you have a healthy soil with high organic matter, you're going to have thriving biological populations in there. Provided you continue to have it like that, it will go on and on. To claim that it lasts at least a year or so is a very, very reasonable claim. I kind of give a crazy example on the other side. In a certain state, we've done a lot of work in the past with the Department of Transportation. So they would buy compost for their wildflower beds, they would put out the compost, and the very next thing they would do is fumigate the whole thing. Well, in a case like that, the compost is not giving you disease suppression for any extended period of time. So we say typically a year or more. Yeah. Okay, so the major real-life example I'm going to dwell on, it comes from, actually both examples come from based around our facility in Florida. So this is our Brighton, Florida facility. We designed the facility and we manage it. A group of investors own it. It started out as a 100,000 ton per year biosolids and yard waste facility. Today it's running at about 120% capacity, so we're up around 120,000 tons. While we were developing that facility, I came in contact with a company called Life Soils. They have a technical division today that they call Harvest Crest. It was the Harvest Crest brand back then. And they were really one brilliant guy, Darren Midland, was the driver in there. So basically what they're doing, they were developing inoculants to add to compost to both accelerate the composting process and to help make compost a disease suppressant. So we first met about 6 years ago, and we said, let's come back and talk in a few years. So by the time we got our facility up and going and fully commercial, they had made tremendous progress. They managed to get quite a bit of research done at the University of Florida on, quite frankly, a shoestring budget. And they also had made real significant inroads into the commercial space in Florida. So we've worked out an agreement with them where we are actually inoculating our product with our compost with their product. And I'll share just one piece of their research, and this is done by, I think it's Dr. William Crow. He's a plant pathologist at the University of Florida. So this was one of the I think a very significant study. So they took why 20% rather than 15%. I have no idea, but this is the study. But they did root lengths, and obviously the general principle, the greater the root structure, the healthier, more vibrant plant you're going to have. They also did a measure of nematode control. So versus the conventional peat control, with 20% command compost in the mix, they got 89% fewer nematodes. Now what I find even more curious is when they took the compost command mix up to 40%, they got 89% of a reduction. This has been really obviously dramatic results, and they've been able to build on this quite a lot. So meantime, the citrus industry in Florida is quite frankly being devastated by citrus greening, also known as many other names. The green death is one. Very, very serious disease. It has wiped out somewhere in the region of 1/3 of the citrus industry in Florida. It's also, I guess this maybe puts in perspective how serious a potential problem it is. The U.S. Government has listed it as a potential bioterror tool. Net result is a combination of our compost and command is now being used very widespread in the citrus industry in Florida. And it's not so much that it attacks the bacteria directly that causes the citrus greening. It is that the improvement in soil health as a result of the compost command is having a significant abatement, effect on the citrus, or on the disease, I should say. And then the other one, very briefly, is we make a similar product with them. They have a slightly different concoction. In terms of the plant production of compost, it's a much finer product, very fine. We're talking a 1/4 inch minus product, and we're using that in golf courses. We're over 200 golf courses at this point. And this is just one example. This was, I think this was Dollar Spot. The combination of those two have led to this. Today we have a situation in Florida where we have a full-scale commercial composting facility, and 100% of the compost is being sold, or the number one reason why 100% of the compost is being sold is because of its disease suppression properties. And the demand is far outstrips. It is the first, we've been in business 26 years, this is the first facility where we're actually selling the compost under contract more than a year in advance of making it. As most people in the business of sales and marketing of compost know, there are no long-term contracts in the sale of compost, or very rarely. In this case, there is. Yeah. So what does that mean, I guess, for the big picture and Biosolids Compost? Just take a quick look at the potential market. Turf, lawns, sports fields, gardens, etc., or lawns, part of gardens, is the largest crop in the United States today, somewhere in the region of 50 million acres. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's a growing market all the time. From a disease point of view, fungi and bacterial diseases cost 7 to 15% crop loss globally. In the United States alone, that's over a $40 billion loss. So I guess, needless to say, there is a lot of potential out there. I should say most of these soil-borne diseases. So why aren't we multimillionaires and billionaires from this? So I'm going to touch on the challenges and some of the possibilities. Okay, firstly, we need more research. We need research that's geography specific, crop specific, and soil specific. We are just at the very early stages right now of designing studies for where we can export what we've done in Florida to North Carolina. We're hopefully be looking at things like peanuts and blueberries, and we're going to be going after with the command folks wherever we think the highest dollars are in terms of disease problems. Interesting thing, even though turf makes up is the largest crop in the United States. It gets 0.0005% of the US Department of Agriculture research budget. Or in the language that we talk about, it gets 5 parts per million of the research budget of the United States. Compost related products, anything is, we've just gone through, actually we're just at the final stages of patenting an aspect of our process, so I can vouch for this. Patenting is a difficult process. Without patents, you are not as attractive to big marketing companies, distribution companies, and that the chemical-based industry. They want a clean product that they can patent and distribute worldwide. Compost-based natural products, and the performance of the product can rarely be narrowed down to one single microbe or one single aspect of the product. It's typically a combination of a lot of things that are very complex from a patenting point of view. Product availability. If I'm somebody like Command who's developing inoculants, I can't just go. I can't do that in a large scale because I can't sign up with somebody who can supply me with compost around the whole country. Not all composts are equal. A very important one. And I'm not here implying that one compost is better than another. Although actually I am going to address that later. What I really mean there is a couple of things. Is the nutrient aspects of compost is an issue, but it also affects the biology. The composting process itself has a fairly significant impact on the biology. And maybe a way I've thought about explaining this is, if you were to write a manual for the most perfectly controlled composting process, just to make compost, and you were to write another manual to make compost for the primary purpose of optimizing the disease suppression properties of the finished compost, both manuals would be the exact same. If you allow your compost to get too dry, that's going to negatively impact the biology at the end. If the compost gets too hot, it's going to negatively impact the biology. So controlling that process all along the way. This is more doable, obviously, in a more modern, controlled indoor facility. Okay. On the positive side, what's in our favor going forward? Number one, even with all the billions spent on disease control, diseases are winning. Whether it's homes, lawns, agricultural crops, diseases are winning, and they're winning for many reasons. But one very good reason why they're winning is soil health. There is no chemical in the market today that addresses a fundamental problem, which is soil health, and this is tied very much to low organic matter. It is not cheap. It may be expensive to develop a new composting facility and put a new product on the market, but it is very, very expensive to develop a new chemical and put it on the market. And part of that significant cost is that in terms of the research, making the product, and the regulatory approvals, it's a long window of time. Yeah. Regulations. And here I'm referring mostly to not so much the regulations in the making of the product, but in the use of the product. There are more and more regulations on certifying people who can apply chemicals, where you can use them, when you can use them, how you can use them, and such. Regulations are in the general direction of tightening all the time in that regard. And this is, I think, an interesting twist from a point of view of biosolids. We all in the industry talk about kind of the emotional reactions to various aspects of biosolids use and management. There's a lot of that with chemicals as well. Overall, there is a resistance to using chemicals out there. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And ironically here, a product like Command Compost, which though will have biosolids as a major ingredient, in a way that, let's call it emotion, let's call it hysteria, whatever we want to call it, in a way actually will help products like that, because they are removing chemicals off the market. A couple more drivers. From a composter's point of view, and I should have made this point maybe on, there was a time when we would call those inoculants and that guys with bugs in a bag, and as a composter, certainly I think most composters, I would certainly fall into this category, were skeptics of this. There are more and more products out there that appear like Command to be producing good results. The more of those products are out there, I think it's going to be the better for composters. There are going to be more opportunities to try different things. Okay. Obviously, success breeds success. Things are moving in the right direction. If we can, and the Command folks really deserve more credit than we do for this. if they can notch up more successes like they have with the citrus industry and the golf course industry, that is only going to make it a little bit easier for the next, for the next effort. And branding, this is the part, actually one of the parts that attracted me to Command first day, is it gives us the opportunity to brand the product. So like, for instance, the golf course product is being sold today. It's not been sold as compost. McGill makes its own, we call it our sports turf product. This is a different product and it's been called Command. And I think there's value to that, that I think is, well, we know now is being converted to dollars and cents. Yeah. Just another example of another, it's a company called or a product called Grape Grow. They just brought this to my attention a couple of months ago, and I thought I'd show it here. So why Biosolids Compost? And I say this from our 26 years now of experience. It's by far, and you hear this from others, Biosolids Compost is by far the most consistent product out there. It's the most tested, it's the most manufactured. There's a haphazardness about virtually all other compost ingredients. Yard waste, it's a very seasonal thing. It's universally available, and I'd compare this here, say, in the long, I guess I may have mentioned long, these 2 points are connected. In terms of the long term, it's universally available. Biosolids generation, as the world gets more and more focused on regulations and going forward, there's going to be more biosolids there. We may do a better job of dewatering it to bring down the volumes, but in total there's going to be more. If I compare this to something that gets a lot of interest in the composting world, it's food waste. Well, there's a huge campaign to compost more food waste, but it's part of a bigger campaign to eliminate food waste. So it's part of our business, we should, in the food waste world, we are going to work our way out of a job, because we'll eliminate the better job we do of separating it and all that and getting focused on it. I do not see that happening in the world of biosolids. Okay, and the most important one of all is, and this is not in any way meant to be kind of put down other compost, yard waste compost, and many others. Time after time after time again, we hear from customers, and the folks at Command will say this regularly. Biosolids based compost, if you meet the other basic principles, have you consistent, is it stable, is it screened to the market size, do you give customer service? If you level the playing field in all of those things, compost pretty much always outperforms other compost. Okay. So that's it. I guess I have a closing line that is my take on the whole thing looking forward. Oops, I did it on my notes, yeah. There's an awful lot being written about the resource value of biosolids, mostly from a point of view of phosphorus and nitrogen. But my thinking is that biosolids, when composted, can become, quite frankly, the foundation ingredient for a biotechnology solution to plant diseases. And as the major ingredient in the soil-based health products, biosolids may achieve it or secure its highest and best value in the future. So, thank you very much.
Any questions for Noel? I think you've stunned us to some extent here.
Thanks.
I would glad make some biosolids compost right